been listening from the beginning right here, because we're going from the avant-garde and the challenging to like a very different direction for each. And this one, Matt, I think you will build, sort of run the numbers, and then Josh will take us into it. So go ahead and share.
All right, so we're gonna talk about Chic with Risque. This comes in at number 876 in the 1970s on Best Ever Albums, number 84 in 1979, number 5043 of all time, and this is our lone Rolling Stone installment here. This comes in at number 414 in Rolling Stone, and I forgot to mention, it's actually Chic's second highest rated album on Best Ever Albums, behind 1978's C'est Chic, which is French for it's chic.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Thank you for the deep knowledge, Matt.
Sure. I took 4 years of French in high school.
There you go.
And then went to Ireland. So. Wow, this album was a real disappointment for me. I don't know what I was expecting. Maybe a bit more complexity. I really struggled to see what the big deal about this album was. I was trying, obviously, if it's an album we're talking about, there's some sort of importance to it on some level, or influence. And it just sounded like an album of samples on repeat. And there wasn't a lot of variation within the songs. It was almost just, like those disco albums that we talked about, but even more so, it was just designed to be put on in the background at a club or something. It's almost like ambient dance music, and the songs were too long. You could listen to like half of the song and just understand everything, what the rest of the song was. There was nothing. It was not building towards anything. It was not adding things throughout or kind of changing it up. It felt very much the same track over and over, or the same song throughout the whole song, and there's not really even any choruses necessarily, and it's more maybe just trying to evoke a vibe, or kind of a cool feeling other than anything else. There's not really, even the lyrics are kind of repetitive, and Good Times is the opening track. It's probably the song that everyone is most familiar with, and it's a track that I just wanted to sing Rapper's Delight to. That just adds, I can see why they took that sample for it, because it just like, that's almost like what this album was made for, was rappers taking the tracks and adding stuff to it.
Yeah. Well, and it's also one of like the monstrous bass lines in the history of dance music ever. So in fairness, yes.
Yeah, maybe the bass lines are a standout on this album, but really I struggled to, it wasn't even an album that I wanted to dance to. I was just like, what, this is like a waste of my time. I'm sounding overly harsh now probably than when I was listening to it, but it really didn't do much for me.
Okay.
Damn.
Matt?
Wow, Josh. I am definitely not down on this album. I like this probably a lot more than Josh. My biggest issue is the length, right? I think that there's some song, there is a repetitive nature to it. I think the ideas are really, they're fun, they're good, they're great bass lines. Even the slower songs like A Warm Summer Night or When You Cry, When You Hear the Song, I like those. They were kind of nice little, ballady, songs that, kind of broke up the album a little bit. But it's a disco album, and it's designed for dancing and probably playing at clubs and stuff. And there's, so that's probably why some of these songs went long. I don't know. I obviously I'm not a huge into dance music itself. I know that within the genre there's lots of remixes and songs that they redo, that they make longer, things like that. I don't know if they were I don't know if they were necessarily doing that in the 70s. It's kind of like maybe they would play songs at a club or whatever that this is the song from the record, and maybe that's why they had, some of the songs go long. But yeah, Good Times does not need to go over 8 minutes. That's
too much Good Times.
Yeah, exactly. Warm Summer Night. It's an okay song that probably needs to be cut in half easily. So that's my biggest issue with this, is that the length really does a disservice to a lot of these songs. Now, those are kind of more extreme examples, but they have some ones that are like, Can't Stand to Love You is less than 3 minutes, so that's more palatable. But for something that's not terribly and really right up my alley or in the genre that I go to, I still found plenty of elements that I liked about this. And particularly listening to it this week, it was a real nice palate cleanser because there's nothing else that we really listened to that was kind of like this. There was a lot more challenging records, I think, this week. And so overall, I'm probably thumbs in the middle, thought slightly up, because I think, there's definitely, just for that bass line in Good Times. I mean, I agree, Josh, it's hard not to hear that song and not to think of, it's hard to hear that song and not think of Rapper's Delight, because that's just, and that's, it says something about that bass line is kind of responsible for rap, right? Because Rapper's Delight's like kind of where it started, the genesis of rap, or
definitely at the beginning.
Yeah. So, so that in and of itself makes this, that at least that song an important song, which is on this record, which makes this an important record. So, yeah, I'm a slightly thumbs up on this. This was a relatively fun listen, but yeah, I would agree. It definitely kind of wore out its welcome, within each song, because it doesn't need to be that long for my taste.
Also, isn't Nile Rodgers, shouldn't we name check him? Isn't he on this album?
He is, yes. And actually, let me read to you, Josh.
He's the producer, right?
I think I don't know. I think he was more than that, though, wasn't he? He's a musician, though.
I think he produced this album.
Okay.
If I remember correctly.
We can fact check that. But on Rolling Stone said, on Risque, the dynamic duo of guitarist Nile Rodgers and bassist Bernard Edwards fuse sleek R&B, new wave, and New York City club flash. Good Times is Chic's most prophetic groove. The story of rap on wax begins here, with the Sugar Hill Gang rhyming over it on Rapper's Delight. So that's all it says about that in Rolling Stone. So, John, what do you think?
Yeah, I have to join the Josh side on this one.
Yeah?
I think when Josh said I was so disappointed, I said Josh and I heard this the same way then, because there were. So I'll talk about where I have the same thoughts as Josh. I'll add a couple new thoughts too. So the thoughts is when Josh said this is like a sample machine for future hip hop, I'm like, that's exactly right, because that to me is the influential nature of this. Yes, and this album, by the way, is filled with good bass grooves. So like, I'll start by saying that's the clear high on this. I like the bass. But yeah, this is more the repetitive nature of it just makes it seem like a sample. It's like kind of how Parliament and Funkadelic were sampled constantly, but the difference was that I like the songs in entirety from Parliament and Funkadelic, whereas here it seemed like it was like Dr. Frankenstein's monster. I was picking, okay, what am I going to sample from this? And I felt like I was like those Beastie Boy albums where they're just grab out like as many stuff as they can and just slap. So I agree on that. I think what surprised me most was I expected a really, like when I thought Chic, and I know bits and pieces, right? I thought, okay, there's going to be tasty bass grooves all over this, which there were. So I got that. I definitely expected disco, and I got lots of that. Mm-hmm. And I think I expected more funk. And there wasn't a lot of funk, in my opinion, on this in the way that I'm thinking about funk. What replaced the funk element of it was what I would call like a quiet storm R&B type of feel to this, especially with the ballads. And boy, I think people know I will stand R&B and especially classic soul a lot. I love those genres, but there is another lane of R&B and soul, which I will call the quiet storm sort of R&B that is really repetitive and to me sort of like lyrically devoid of content in opinion that this resembled a lot more than I'd hoped it would. Songs like Warm Summer Night and My Forbidden Lover kind of, to me, were in that lane, although I think it was tougher with A Warm Summer Night for me to get into it because of the length, as you guys mentioned. I think that was really my knock on this. I kept waiting for the songs to show me another layer or an added layer of complexity, and instead I just got a repeated chord. I felt like that bad feeling I feel about disco music, where I feel like the reason the songs are so long is because you go take a bump for two and a half minutes of it, right? And when you come back, it feels like a 4-minute song because you were going to take a bump for 2.5 minutes, in the same way that sometimes techno has that feel for me where it just kind of all runs together, right? And like you eventually shift it a little bit. I didn't dislike this album. I think for me, it felt like more of a missed opportunity in the sense of, I think I had mentioned that I liked the Donna Summer album, and to me, the Donna Summer album was this type of music done in a much more appealing way for my ears. I thought there were more hooks. The attitude was better. It was we all mentioned how long that album was too, but the length was more the number of tracks. I did not feel that like I was just sort of on repeat with different stuff. And I look at this as 7 distinctly different ideas, but in the same lane. And some of them are going slow and some of them are dance music. But it just didn't hook me in the way that I thought it was going to, because I felt like it was going to be just a continuation of something. And maybe that's on me for the expectations I want. But I can't say I like this one. It didn't connect with me, unfortunately. Yeah.
Check out this fact. CHIC has been nominated for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame 11 times and has not been inducted.
Yeah.
So
I didn't know the number, but I think I knew that they've been nominated many times.
And they weren't even nominated in 2018, I guess.
They might be done. Isn't there like a past, like once you, is there a time where you become ineligible for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame? Maybe not.
So other people feel the same way about this. Is my point.
Yeah, I could see that though. If you guys went into this thinking it was going to be like, you had some expectation going into it, and then it didn't hit on that. I
also fell into the Matt trap. Yeah, I fell into the Matt trap too, where I think at first I went and think it was going to be there, and then I was like, wow, this is the this one was on the top 500. It surprises me. I mean, Good Times is a legitimately, but even Good Times was diminished because the 8-minute version of it isn't the Good Times. I think the Good Times I think of was like a 4-minute version of it, and the 8, like I feel like it's at like the roller rink. You're like, all right, next song. You know what I mean? And you're kind of getting there, and I'm like, God, I shouldn't feel that way about Good Times because that bass lick is too good to be buried. That when you get to the 6-minute mark, right, you start to almost forget how good the bass line is because you're like, heard it. So
you shouldn't be complaining about that bass line ever. Right.
And I wasn't complaining. It's more just
but complaining or wanting it to go away, you know what I mean? Like that's something that and you're right, and I was the same way. I'm like, all right, enough of this. Like that's so good that you shouldn't be saying that. If you're saying that, then there's something wrong with the length of the song, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
absolutely. So it sounds like Matt is going to say a slight recommend, right? And,
I'll do a slight recommend. I'll give it a little props.
Okay, and Josh,
you're
going to say
down.
Thumbs down, and I'm going to say I have to give this one a thumbs down myself. Not like a harsh thumbs down, but not going to be in certainly my top 60% of albums we've listened to for sure. Yeah.